two of us, Bill and I, have just written this exciting book. This is my Oprah Winfrey moment, The Age Trap. I tell my policy friends that if they read as fast as I do, they can read it on the shuttle in one direction. If they're a slow reader, say they went to Harvard Business School, they could probably read it on a round-trip shuttle. It's very, very short. Tonight, I'll say a few words, but I'm joined by my colleague, Gita Johar, in the marketing division. I am going to be very low-tech in my presentation, Gita very high-tech and multimedia, so we'll average out great. Eric Tienou, who is a 2003 graduate of the school, will give a whole series of perspectives, but really an on-the-ground perspective. And Bill Duggan, who's a co-author on this book, Bill and I come to the book from slightly different angles, but with a very much a common theme. Bill worked for the Ford Foundation in Africa in many years. Has a great deal of experience. I should say just a minute about what brought Bill and me to focus on this book, or I'll say so in my own words, and Bill later can say in his. Two things did it for me. I'm an economist who typically focuses, I guess, on high-growth episodes and rich people. So why on earth am I sitting writing a book about Africa in this decade? And the reason to me was pretty simple. One, I won't bore you with, but it's the more important for me. I actually believe there's a moral imperative here. I'll put that aside. The other issue is we've had 40 years in which we have spent a vast amount of money, more than $1 trillion in constant dollars, and sub-Saharan Africa today is poorer than it was in 1960. And in anything in business, when you're sort of looking at strategies, when you see a failure at that level, you have to step back and say, gosh, what could we have done differently? There have been a lot of approaches to talking about aid in Africa recently. Some schools of thought are based on the West, or read industrial countries, needs to target a certain amount of their GDP for aid. As an economist, I always found it a little strange. I'm used to thinking about output, not input. So I judge a program based on its success, not how much it costs. So I sort of put those arguments aside. Another, recently, there's a book called Dead Aid, some of you may have seen, by Demi Zamoyo. It says, well, aid has been a failure, with which Bill and I would agree, but so let's just stop doing it. Well, that fails both of my tests. One, it actually does fail my moral imperative, which I'll mention but not really talk to you about, unless you press me on it. But it also fails a practical test. I don't think that's what our political masters intend to do. And there's abundant evidence from economics to suggest that there's much good work that we could be doing. Now, Bill and I came to this from a couple of different perspectives. For me, I spent part of my time in the White House on international development issues and have pushed President Bush very hard toward what became called Millennium Challenge Account. The idea that I had taken it based on some work I and others had done in economics was to say that certain governance variables appeared to predict growth very well, and if we could somehow change institutional characteristics, we might have a better chance at growth. And the president was persuaded that that was a very good use of taxpayer money, and that we would use as precondition to major new assistance from the Millennium Challenge Account changes in economic institutions. Now, that argument, while I would argue well-meaning, since I made it, I think missed a very important step, because it really continued foreign assistance through a government-to-government channel. And the thesis Bill and I came to in the book is really twofold. One, if you look at all episodes of growth that have been meaningful in modern times, but as we also argue in the book, historical growth episodes too, they're characterized by rapid growth, productivity growth, income growth of local business. Not multinationals, not microfinance, but local, mid-sized business. That's where growth episodes come from. And what we did was take as a specific example on how this might be jump-started the one very successful episode of massive development restarting business, and that was the Marshall Plan. Now, the Marshall Plan, when you say it, and you use the words Marshall Plan, use the word Africa, people's first reactions, these guys must Marshall Plan, which was the major American assistance program to Europe in the period 1948 roughly to 1952, is characterized as a massive aid program. That is not at all what the Marshall Plan was. I had the occasion to give a talk at Oxford for the 60th anniversary of Marshall's Harvard commencement speech, and I did something that's very unusual for economists. I actually went back and read what Marshall said before I commented on it. And what was interesting about that reading is that Marshall was very much focused on local business. If you look at the way the Marshall Plan was set up, and the reason Bill and I took this as a rhetorical device, the Marshall Plan loaned money directly to local businesses. It was only when that money was repaid that it went to host governments for infrastructure. So it turns the current aid world on its head. Does the software first, local business, then the hardware, not the other way around. Now, we also came at this from a philosophical perspective because in the development world, I would say that there's really two schools of thought. One I would call a big push school, coming out of work the way I was taught development economics, let's just say a long time ago. And it went to the effect of needing to have massive jump starting of an economy, build all the roads, build all the schools, get the healthcare infrastructure going, then the economy develops. No normal economy ever developed that way. And the modern growth miracles of this century, none of them developed that way, any more than we had historically. Less attractive to describe, but more realistic of growth episodes is a more Hayekian approach where lots of local businesses thrive and prosper, and then public goods follow. That's the way countries in the West develop. Now, I'm aware that there are a lot of criticisms of these sorts of arguments. I already mentioned that Anvisa Loyo would say just stop aid. Bill and I have a mutual friend, Bill Easterly, who's also been very critical of aid. But to me, a more compelling line of inquiry is the recent work by George Ayate, who's a Ghanaian economist, whose book Africa Unchained really is a paean to local business. And in fact, there was a very rich local business culture in Africa as recently as the 1950s. So it's simply not true that there's never been any history of promising local business in Africa. So our thesis again is twofold. You've got to focus aid on local business, and you've got to do it through the Marshall Plan. And we argue that what we've got is doable. We know how to do this. We just spent a whole bunch of money in the Millennium Challenge account. It's tangible. We'll tell you what to do, and it's affordable because we're not asking to spend new money. Now, what are some of the issues with Marshall Plan argument? Well, one argument is Europe in 1947 is not the same as Africa today. Absolutely correct. But 2 points. One, what we're arguing about the Marshall Plan, which is a nice rhetorical device, is really how the plan worked. The Marshall Plan was run by a business person, Paul Hoffman, who was the CEO of Studebaker, which, remember when this country used to make cars? History lesson for students in the Paul Hoffman was a business person. The Marshall Plan was run entirely by business people. There were regional offices that competed with one another. There was a central office in Europe who morphed into what is now the OECD, a major international organization. But the regional offices within Europe competed for institutional reforms. In those days, it was really about trade reforms to have access to Marshall Plan dollars. And those dollars went to local businesses and they were repaid by government. So the real point of the Marshall Plan is the software. It's how it worked. It was managed by business people, not by the State Department. And it was on the ground local business encouraging. The second thing is that not all of Europe in 1947 was, as you might imagine, Europe today. Greece in 1947 was a very poor country. And we spend a lot of time in the book on a case study of the development of Greece and business in Greece in the late 1940s and early 1950s, which we view as very much a roadmap for Africa today. Now, a second criticism is, well, you guys are economists, and so you ignore the fact that culture is the really big problem. And there's simply not a business culture in Africa. Like many economists, I'm not always very sympathetic to these arguments because growth miracles have happened in any of a number of cultures, religious heritages, legal systems around the world. And in any event, as Ayate notes very powerfully in his book, there was a very rich pro-business culture, local business culture in Africa as recently as the 1950s. And while we're not celebrating colonialism, we're simply pointing out there were local businesses and local entrepreneurs. Another issue is, well, why not let the NGOs do it? Well, NGOs can do a lot of good things. They are very good in healthcare. They're very good in helping in education. But no country that went through a growth boom did so developed by NGOs. Growth comes from the activities of local business people. And sometimes, as we document with examples in the book, well-meaning foundations, well-meaning philanthropists can actually crowd out the efforts of local business people. One other argument I'll just mention quickly is, well, don't you need to build the infrastructure first? Don't people have to be healthy? Don't you have to have the roads before you can do it? Again, not how growth has typically happened. I grew up in the American South, which in the 1940s, 1950s had infrastructure deficits, health deficits, and as the region became prosperous, public goods happened. Modern India's growth has been one in which prosperity has led public goods, not the other way around. Who can help? This is a big deal in our book. Our book, which is short, is a paean to the business community. The Marshall Plan was not only led by a business person, it was sold by business people. The Congress in the late 1940s was no more intellectually forward-leaning than Congress is today. And the Congress at the time was very suspicious of the notion of helping Europe, even though with the lens of history, we know how powerful a statement for the country that was. It was the business people who led that decision. And we're asking business leaders in the country to step up for Africa today. One, it's morally the right thing to do. And second, it is powerfully in the nation's economic interest. Who can help is also younger business people. You all know Columbia Business School has been very active in Kenya and Tanzania for some time, and we do so with a distinct purpose. We have no grand mission that we can change whole economies, but we are working with local entrepreneurs, and our faculty are working with the people who teach, and that has a powerful multiplier. I would just close with two things before turning over to Gita. The year I was born, South Korea had about the same per capita GDP as a typical sub-Saharan African country. I'm not so old standing here today, and we know that the divergence is dramatic. South Korea is one of the wealthiest countries in the world. Sub-Saharan Africa is poor today than it was in 1960. George Marshall said at Harvard that the breakdown of local business during the war was the problem that aid had to solve. His words are just as accurate 62 years later as they were that day in June of 1947. He was right, and we can do this.
So Glenn has talked a lot and very heartfelt about this whole notion of how business can really move development forward. So, but he doesn't just talk the talk, he also walks the walk. And as he mentioned, we have faculty going to Kenya and Tanzania trying to jumpstart at least small and medium businesses. So I'm going to talk about one example of something that we've done in Tanzania. But first, let me give you some background of how this came about. So I'm going to talk about the 10,000 Women program that Goldman Sachs started last year. And this program was launched in 2008, $100 million given over 5 years. And the idea is to literally create 10,000 women entrepreneurs, hence the name 10,000 Women, in that period of time. And Columbia Business School is one of the partner schools. There are a number of NGOs and other business schools and other academic institutions that are also partners with the 10,000 Women program. And the idea is to improve the quality of business education, but also to create entrepreneurs, to create role models among women entrepreneurs in Africa, and also to build capacity in the sense of improving business school education in Africa. So those are the three parts of the 10,000 Women program that I'm going to focus on, and how I and others at Columbia have tried to implement this, starting with Tanzania this summer. So the first part is providing the business education to 10,000 women over 5 years, also building quality and capacity, and finally mentoring and post-graduation support for these women entrepreneurs. Okay. There are 2 business schools that we are working with. One in Tanzania is the University of Dar es Salaam Business School, also known as UDBS, and that's the one I'm going to talk about today for the rest of my talk. But we're also partnering with the United States International University, or USIU, in Nairobi. And the activities that have gone on and will be going on over the next 5 years include teaching women entrepreneurs and then helping them build their business plans. Also working with faculty at UDBS at this point in time to help with curriculum development, to help with case teaching method, to develop cases, and also to help with providing a PhD education to future faculty at African business schools. So let me just show you a few photographs and take you with me to Tanzania. This is the dean of the UDBS, the University of Dar es Salaam Business School. Her name is Marcelina, and so she's Glenn's counterpart at UDBS. And you see her in her office, and she is really keen and committed and motivated to keep this partnership going. So she and I are 2 women of the 10,000 that will hopefully, be at the end of 5 years helping bring this about. This is Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. In case you had any, if you haven't been there, if you had any notions, I just want to show you what it really is like. The shopping experience, since I'm in marketing, I like to go and look at how people shop all over the world. And this is a shop right in Tanzania, very close to the business school. That's what it looks like. And this is the new business school building for the UDBS. So just as we have our new business school building coming up, they have the new business school building as well that's going to be open next year. Computer labs at UDBS, and students, just as you all do, working with their laptops at UDBS. Okay. So let me start by talking about this program that we went and implemented this summer. And Professor Eric Abrahamson is here, who was one of the people who went in August. Charlie Calomaris from our finance and economics group, as well as Murray Lowe from the management group, were instrumental in bringing this about. And the idea is to help people build business plans. So I'm going to profile one person, just so you understand a little bit of how this works and how it's mutually beneficial for both of us. Because I can say right in the beginning that I learned a great amount as well from these entrepreneurs. Because they start out with very little capital and have very little access to capital, and yet manage to really go places. So Helen was somebody who felt she had a moral calling, and she felt she really needed to go back and help her country, but didn't know where to start. She wasn't very rich, she didn't have a lot of money, but she had this urge and calling to really help. So what she did is she came to the United States and worked as a health aide, which is not, as you all know, a very highly paid occupation. She worked as a health aide for 10 or 15 years, all the while sucking away her money so that she could go back one day and make a difference. And when she went back, what she wanted to do is start a small business, and she decided to do a microfinance venture, and that was 2006 when she started. She started with her own money, that's all she had, the money she'd saved from working in the US. She started with her own money, went back, hired one person, and gave out something like 20 loans that first year, 2006. In 2009, at this point of time, she's given out 5,000 loans and has really helped a large number of people. And she takes a lot of pride in this. But the reason she was in our certificate program is she says, this is not enough. I need to learn more, I need to scale up, and I need to help a lot more people. Okay. So I'll just give you a sense of how this works. So you've all heard of the microfinance model, where you have the self-help groups who kind of help each other repay. So that's the traditional model that she works with. So here she is in her office, helping some people with their small businesses. Often it could be something like selling, kangas, the skirts that people wear in Tanzania, on the street. So they're really hawkers, but that's their small business. Eventually they start shops. It could be chicken farmers, so they have really small chicken farms. It could be people that dry fruits in their backyard and then package them and sell them. So we're talking pretty small businesses. Okay? Her organization is called Belita, and Belita stands for Better Life for Tanzania, because she really believes in this, she's really committed, she's really driven, and it's just amazing to meet her and see how she's taken this idea and made it pretty real, and coming to the certificate program just so she can scale up even more and learn even more. That's Belita's team. They're a team of 20. Again, started with one person 3 years ago and now hires 20 people to go out and do outreach and really build up this microfinance organization. I want you to hear from her in her own words, so let me just click through to this video.
How do you find the course? Do you find any surprises in this course?
To be honest, this course has amazed me very much because me personally, I've been able to get things which I was not able to get them. Although I have a Bachelor of Commerce here, and I've gone through postgraduate diploma in microfinance and dealing with the microfinance issue. But when it comes to entrepreneurship, how to be a real entrepreneur, this is a challenge. And actually, I'm very grateful. I'm not regretting at all for my time, which I'm coming here at 3 to, let's say, 7:30 every day. And I found it more entrepreneurial, very good. Actually, it has motivated my company because the lessons which I learned here, and I make the adjustment every day, and I've seen the fruit of it, and don't want things to end. Actually, it was in my plan that if this course, the same like this one, next year I'll be enrolled again in this certificate. It is so good, and I have a high expectation on it, and I'm sure by the time I'm done in March, I'll be a great entrepreneur ever.
So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
I don't know how to follow up on that. I'm not a great entrepreneur. I don't have any multimedia either, so I have literally 4 slides because I know I'm standing between you and happy hour. So. Well, while we find our presentation, I'll start. So I'm a Columbia Business School alum, class of 03. And so mine is not going to be from an academic background or from a marketing background or really working with 1,000 women. It's more about experiences I've had growing up in Africa and experiences I have with friends and colleagues and actually classmates doing business in Africa. So my family's originally from Burkina Faso, which is in West Africa. It's part of Francophone Africa, so it's, if you're standing in Ghana, you go straight north, that's Burkina Faso. It's a country of about 15 million people, about the size of Colorado, and it's probably one of the poorest countries on the face of the earth. But one of the things that Dr. Hubbard talked about, and also Gita talked about, was about just access to capital and access to encouraging people to do work. And one of the things that what I saw growing up and trying to do business there is that there are a lot of impediments to doing work and doing business in Africa. So while Gita was in East Africa and Anglophone East Africa, Francophone West Africa has a number of challenges as well. Slightly, somewhat different, but somewhat similar as well. If I could find my presentation.
Sorry about that.
All right. Okay. All right. things that that in the book the A-Trap talks about and they use very well is about ranking the ease of doing business across the board, around the world. So for you and I standing here in the United States, almost Western European countries, it's very easy to do business on a whole lot of different factors, whether it be just to do a permit to start a business or go out to a bank and take out a loan. How many people took out a loan to come to school here? Okay. In a lot of places in Africa, that's not a possibility to take out large amounts of money to even go to school, let alone start a business that's going to have a return right away. So the World Bank has this report about doing business and how they rank the countries, ranked from 183 countries around the world on 10 different scales. Let me go back to this page. So they're talking about starting a business, dealing with construction permits, employing workers, registering property, getting credit, which is, I think, in my opinion, is one of the key places. Protecting investors, paying taxes, trading across borders, which is another really big problem in Africa. Enforcing contracts and then closing your business. Obviously, bankruptcy go with that, especially nowadays we're very familiar with. So let's just take a look at some of the countries. If you take a look here, obviously Singapore is ranked 1 for a number of reasons. In the United States, we are ranked 4 in the 2010 ranking. And then obviously the further down you go down the list, you start going to more and more African countries. And thank you, Dr. Hubbard, to talk about the difference between South Korea especially and sub-Saharan African countries, because that's a very, very good case that we need to think about when we talk about aid and we talk about development. Because Ghana was actually the first sub-Saharan African country to get independence from European countries 51 years ago, 1957. And about that time, it was roughly equal in GDP with Korea. And it had a thriving business class. Actually, my relatives talk about Ghanaian traders coming from Ghana to Burkina Faso, even during the old colonial days with two different colonial masters. But it was actually very thriving. Nowadays, if you take a look at it, we drive Korean cars, we use Korean microwaves to cook our food, we use Korean cell phones, and we don't here in the United States, don't consume anything from Ghana, with the exception of cocoa and our chocolate bars. And if you take a look at it, Ghana, so South Korea is ranked 19th on this list in terms of ease of doing business. So it's obviously very conducive to really opening a business between small and large. And if you take a look at Ghana, which is pretty good by African standards, it's ranked 92nd. And then if you take a look at the country of my origin, Burkina Faso, it's at 147 out of 183. So when we take a look at the ease of doing business, especially in Africa, I believe that out of the bottom quartile of these countries, I think 63% of the bottom quartile of African countries. So it's a very difficult thing for the business climate that we take for granted here in terms of the ability to do business, that people there just, you cannot, there's so many obstacles to actually doing business properly in Africa. So talking again about Burkina Faso, there was actually a quote from Paul Wolfowitz when he was at the World Bank 4 years ago, talking about what it takes to actually start a business, especially in Burkina Faso and a lot of other countries. So I'll let you read the quote, but at that point it was 154, and it's just 147 today. But if you think about what it takes in terms of time and capital, it's very, very prohibitive. It's very cost prohibitive for people to actually start a business, and you wouldn't necessarily want you to think about starting a business if this is what you have to deal with. Most people here, a lot of people are entrepreneurial in nature, and it's not that difficult for you to start a business because you can be able to get capital to start the business. You don't have to deal with a really obstructive regulatory regime to start a business. These are the realities that people in Africa face, and especially in Francophone Africa, it's especially different because we cannot overstate the colonial legacy. So, if you look at, for example, France today, Nicolas Sarkozy is all about making France work because France has a big state role in their economy, and there's huge parastatals. For example, I believe that in France in 2007, I just want to make sure I have those numbers right. Yeah. Public spending in France accounts for 52% of their GDP in 2007 versus public spending in the United States in 2007 only accounted for 37%. So what has happened, especially in Francophone countries, is that they've taken on that model as well, which is reflected in regulations and how you think about business. Business is really the domain of the government, which we've seen is not necessarily the best way to do it. You know, and we see that as a discussion we have here all the time in this country, where we talk about, you know, TARP, or the United States government having ownerships in GM and Chrysler. The things that we generally acknowledge in this country are not healthy for our economy, but there are a lot of other economies, especially the poorest economies in this world, where that is a reality on a daily basis. So, you know, when you think about that, and you think about the challenges are vast, and I think one of the things that we need to think about when you look at Africa is that there are tremendous opportunities nonetheless. People do want to work. There are a lot of other areas within sectors in the economies that are taking off, besides just the typical areas in terms of commodities and things of that nature, but actual more productive sectors of the economy. And despite really what's going on from a regulatory standpoint, and it's still, business is still thriving. And why do I say that? Because in the last several years, certain governments have kind of gotten wise to the fact that if they want to compete on a global basis, they need to really reform their economies. They need to open up. And so there are certain reforms that are going on, and there's tremendous growth in certain areas. So for example, obviously the telecoms area is an area of tremendous growth on the African continent. Consumer goods, you know, just like here, they want, you know, people in Africa want to be able to consume whatever the consumer goods are, say from Coca-Cola to mattresses to whether they are agribusiness. You know, populations are growing. Burkina Faso's population has doubled in the last 30 years. And so as more and more people are growing and you have less and less arable land, there needs to be, the business sector needs to be in there to actually pick up the slack for feeding more and more people over and beyond just a typical aid. And obviously commodities is still a very big business in Africa. As you've seen, I think recently Blackstone made a killing in an investment in an oil company that had rights in offshore oil in Ghana, which they made money back and then some recently. So when we talked about credit, the difficulty in getting credit and financing in sub-Saharan Africa, one of the things that business has realized in the last probably decade or so is that especially private equity plays a big role in the African economy. And you've seen a lot of funds coming into Africa and investing in Africa-only funds to actually invest in, especially telecoms, for example, some consumer areas, things of that nature, some transportation. So we have funds like ECP Africa, which is, I think, the first Africa dedicated fund to raise $1 billion, and is Africa-only focused. Actually, one of my classmates is a partner in that fund. You have Actis, which comes out of the UK, which is another active fund. You have Helios. So you have a lot of activity going on, and more you do have even some of the mainline US and European firms looking to bridge that gap. Because there is a demand for business, there's a demand for these things, but with very shallow banking sectors in some countries, or very restrictive banking sectors in some countries, and then almost non-existent public equity markets, with the exception of South Africa, financing needs to come from somewhere else. And there's definitely growth from that. And then also, not to forget the small and medium enterprise sector as well. So private equity looks at larger scale because they want to get the returns. Small and medium enterprises, it's family-owned businesses. It might be employing 50 people, 100 people, whatever that the size is. But that's also a big sector. I know TechnoServe, which Paul Tienou, one of the professors here at the business school, he's involved with that. It's an NGO that actually helps to really promote the small and medium enterprise sector, I believe in Tanzania, in Ghana, and then look into other places to expand. So, I want to close out on that. Despite all the challenges that the African continent faces, from regulatory perspectives, from poverty perspectives, still the continent is more and more open for business. And you have to be selective about where you want to go. And there are tremendous opportunities. There was a person who graduated 2002 who's from Ghana who went back to Ghana and opened up a cocoa processing plant. He had been working on that for years, and that's what he wants to do. And so there are different opportunities out there, but it's not as easy as, say, starting a business here in the United States, and there will be significant hurdles. And obviously the book, the A-Track book, really talks a lot about kind of the hurdles, and hopefully as we have more and more enlightened leaders on the continent, they will see that opening up the business sector is the best way forward for lifting, for prosperity on a large-scale basis.
Thank you. We'll discuss, and then I'll just...
Just to follow up on something Eric said too, there have been, if you look at the doing business indicators, not all of sub-Saharan Africa is a problem. Mauritius, you probably saw on his list, number 17. Actually, the biggest improvements have been in Rwanda, which moved up about 62 notches in a single year. There are some governments that are very focused on this in sub-Saharan Africa. Bill and I had the chance to meet the leaders of those two countries during UNGA on this very issue, and they are incredibly focused. So why don't we open it up for discussion, and I think Bill will wrap up, and we promise to have you out in time for an easy and long happy hour, so don't fear. Yeah.
I thought that these hurdles, with the fact that there's such a large informal sector vis-a-vis the formal sector, is one of the exact reasons why bottom-up approaches like the Marshall Plan haven't worked without infrastructure in place, without a formal legal system in place. So I don't understand how to reconcile those two.
You mentioned two kinds of infrastructure. It's important to separate them. No growth booms required the physical infrastructure first. They typically came later. But yes, institutions are important. What the Marshall Plan did was say you had to compete on trade liberalization if you wanted American money. And so one of the things the Millennium Challenge account got right was to say we needed an independent judiciary, you needed some of these pro-business reforms, but the money went directly to the government. So it's not a matter of skipping the institutional step, but saying lend the money to the private business. But yeah, one of monopolies. Yeah, Bill.
Microfinance is great, but Tanzania, right, ranks very low in doing business. So if she scales up and tries to establish a formal business, it's going to cost her, 10 years of annual salary. So microfinance has thrived in Africa not simply because people are poor, but because African governments prevent small and medium businesses from existing. And then they also get they also get aid. So why should they change?
Yeah, I think from my experience, from the boom in the informal economy is a direct result of kind of these obstacles being in place. If you have to put up 2,000% of your annual income to start a business, or you have to go through licensing for 4 years to get property, you're not going to do that, and you're much rather be willing to go into the informal sector of the economy. The other side of it is, from the aid perspective, is that for the last 40, 50 years, Africa has been a huge recipient of aid. So especially the leaders knows that the next wave of aid is going to be coming. So there's no incentive for people to make those long-term and lasting reforms. If the aid system changes, then they have to change along with it.
Sir, Bill, you want to call on people? So
no, you
monopolize. Sir.
I had a question on, well, to put it in context, I know there's a lot of backlash against foreign aid workers coming into developing countries, doing a project and leaving without leaving any expertise. Do you have a take on entrepreneurs, foreign entrepreneurs in these countries, and the impact that they have, perhaps?
Well, I'm going to let Bill speak to that in a minute, because he was one of those foreign aid workers who came and left in the economy. But I think in terms of foreign entrepreneurs, if you look at different sizes of business, a lot of this is multinational investment. And in fact, Bill and I have written a piece recently contrasting what China's trying to do in Africa with what we argue the United States should do. China is really resorting to almost a colonial era type resource deals, not promoting local business. It's all about Chinese business. There's an argument, I think, for the U.S. to have entrepreneurs to promote local entrepreneurs. It's not even so much that foreign entrepreneurs have gone in and left. It's more the multinationals. But Bill, you may want to speak from the perspective of the aid world.
Yeah, I think the key is the local business sector. What's the effect on the local business sector? Nobody could say that foreign entrepreneurs are coming in and crowding out the small and medium business of Africa. That's not the problem at all.
So as long as the business captures more value within the country, I guess it's a good idea. I've thought about starting a business in East Africa, so I just want to hear what your take on the value of folks going and doing something.
I think there's tremendous value in foreign entrepreneurs coming into sub-Saharan Africa, and if they're meeting a need, if you're hiring people on the ground and you're treating people with respect on the ground, it's perfectly fine. I mean, if you take a look at economic history would tell us that that's the case. Over and over around the world, what you have is tremendous transfers of knowledge and technology that happens. So it doesn't happen in a closed bubble. I mean, it happens when people from other areas come in and actually, bring in new technology. The people on the ground figure out that technology as well, and then they use it on their own as well. I mean, we see it in the East Asian miracle, that what happened in East Asia after the Second World War, that was tremendous. What happened in the United States during the Industrial Revolution was the same factor, where, with our linkages to Britain at that point in time. So that's just a necessary reality of economic development.
Yes, ma'am.
You've mentioned NGOs being meaningful in the healthcare industry. Talk a little bit about agriculture, specifically research and development of agriculture, which is proven to have one of the most highest ROIs on sort of investment in environmental. What's your take on ag R&D? Where's the place for that in entrepreneurship and data?
Well, do you want to? I mean, I can give my own view, but
Go ahead.
Can you repeat the question?
the question was about agriculture and R&D and investments in agriculture. Growth booms typically are associated with productivity booms in agriculture, and so it is the case that R&D in agriculture is a very good thing. I would note that many of the foundation interventions in agriculture have been counterproductive. I mean, they've actually crowded out the local agribusiness sector, and then when they pull out, there's a vacuum left. We actually have a very specific case study of that in the book.
Yeah, you have to make the distinction between research and development.
Right.
Public sector research in agriculture is fantastic. It's wonderful. There hasn't been enough of it. There should be a lot more. Development is a private sector activity.
Well put. Yes, ma'am, and then sir. Yeah.
I agree with the importance of bringing in business, but if you look at a lot of the poorest in Africa, they are just too poor to, you've got people just dying of malaria every day, and if you want equal growth, then surely you've also got to have ODA going to those people, because there have been a lot of aid successes. The huge jump in aid beginning 2000s resulted in 3 million people on ARVs versus virtually 0 5 years ago. Measles vaccinations are so high, we're saving approximately, I think the stat is something like 1,000 lives a day that wouldn't be saved otherwise. So don't you also have to have those two things working in tandem if you want to have growth that's also saving lives?
The health, we say this in the book, and I said it by remarks, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Again, I think actually President Bush deserves some credit here. The AIDS initiative in Africa comes to mind. But that's not going to jumpstart economic development. And the problem is much of what we talk about is the misspent aid money is really spent on what aid agencies are calling economic development. So it's fine to do the pro-healthcare things. That in and of itself isn't going to jumpstart growth, nor frankly is it necessary. It does make for a healthier economy and it's desirable. But for growth to be the object, you really have to focus on the economic piece, and unfortunately that's not what economic aid does. So it's not that it's bad at all. It just isn't related to growth.
We're only asking for half of aid to go to the local business.
Yeah, because the way
he's the modest one.
Because the way they think about it is twofold. One of the things is that obviously you want a healthy population, you want a population with low infant mortality, you want a population that doesn't have to worry about malaria or things, or AIDS or any of the tropical diseases. But the fact is that from an economic standpoint, there's so many issues and hurdles in that perspective that that's what you need to think about is economic development. For example, in the last 30, 40 years, we've had structural adjustment programs, then we had the enhanced structural adjustment programs, we built dams, we built bridges, but we know that Africa is poorer today than what it was at independence. So all that aid has gone to hopefully producing more healthier populations because we've seen a population boom in the African continent, but we haven't seen an economic boom in the African continent. We haven't seen an economic boom akin to the ones that we've seen in East Asia or China or even India in the last decade. And that's really why you need to think about how do you do business. In Francophone West Africa, one of the issues that we have is that we have smaller countries, averaging 20 to 30 million people. The borders are very tight in terms of restrictions, in terms of trade between the two borders. So there are a lot of other business-specific issues that we need to think about if you want to be able to improve the lives of the people on an everyday basis over and beyond health and education.
Sorry, sir? Yeah.
I just have a comment, and I'm not a student in this school, but I have a daughter here. And I just have to say that Dean was so right. I'm from Ghana.
Would you like to be a student in this school?
I actually applied some time ago. Anyway. You are so right. Africa needs a martial like plan. When Ghana became independent, it gave South Korea $10 million in aid. And since then, if you look at Sub-Saharan Africa, the aid that has gone there, as the Dean has said, is probably about $40 or $50 billion, and we have nothing to show for it, absolutely nothing. So, as the Dean said, aid going to these countries should be targeted to entrepreneurs within the country, and we should bypass the state governments. One, people in Sub-Saharan Africa have ideas. The problem is lack of capital. All right. Interest rate in most of these countries hover around 30%. Imagine applying for a loan and starting a business, a small business with that kind of rate. Essentially, the bank becomes a partner. Okay, so I totally agree that the Dean probably should go to the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank and lecture them. They should read your book and change the way they do business.
I had lunch last week with Bob Zellick, who's a friend, who's president of the World Bank, and he made the World Bank people listen to me. It's a nice, it's a nice thing. Yeah. Eric?
To what extent are the obstacles to the endogenous development of business in these countries imposed by the political regimes? And insofar as they are, what is your proposal to deal with that?
It's very much the case that political economy is very important here. In economics, there's an old saying that there are no $50 bills on the sidewalk because somebody would have picked them up. And typically when people come into these things saying, well, if you just change these institutions, you get growth, well, then why doesn't that happen? Did somebody not read the right economics book? And the answer is there are local elites, of course, that find the current system just fine. They're doing okay. Now, the idea of the Millennium Challenge account was you bypass those elites essentially with a bribe. If you want this large amount of new aid, you have to do things a new way. What Bill and I are proposing is really creating more of a domestic constituency. If you have a lot of now new middle-class domestic entrepreneurs, they become a force for change. There's some recent work that's been done by Luigi Zingalis and Raghu Rajan at Chicago, and Raghu had been the chief economist of the IMF, sort of arguing that this is really the right force for change, try to create this new middle class of entrepreneurs to put pressure on the elites. rather than trying to bribe the elites, you would say. Yes, sir, in the back.
My concern is like, you mentioned something like targeting the AIDS and local entrepreneurs, but I don't know whether you've heard of like agencies like US Markets, USADF. I'm still worried about, they are doing what you're suggesting in terms of like looking for local entrepreneurs to actually give this money to, but they still never get the right results. I had an opportunity to work with USADF at some point, and there's still a missing link in terms of like, how do you really get the right result? Because it's not still, even if you go and take the money and give and try to build a middle class, there is still something missing, which I wanted you to share your thoughts on.
Sure. Well, first of all, we're not arguing that we could build something that's perfect, but I opened by saying we took $1 trillion, we put it into sub-Saharan Africa, and it's poor today than in 1960. So even if we got some leakage, we think we can do better than that. The private equity experience in much of sub-Saharan Africa, as Eric said, has actually been reasonably good. One of the things we've tried to do at the school in our work in Africa is focus on things that may sound mundane to you, but are very important, like credit analysis, trying to develop local lending sectors. And there, I think, NGOs can also be helpful. But I still believe, you can say what you think, Bill, but this focus on local entrepreneurs is the right one, even though, no, we won't get it right any more than Citigroup gets it right all the time, and it's lending. Well, maybe I should have picked it better. You get what I mean. Let me go on this side. Did you?
I just wanted to add just to comment on that, because I come from the business side of things. And, economic development in business is a messy thing. So you'll always have leakage, you'll have failures, but you learn from those different failures and you move on. And I think most African countries have not been, and especially in the private sector, have not been given those opportunities. And where you see those opportunities be given to some degree, way, shape, or form, you see benefits being accrued to the populations. And if you don't even try it, the populations at some point are not going to try to embark on entrepreneurial activities because they know it's not possible. So if you set forth, lay the groundwork for opportunities for actually entrepreneurial activities, people will take advantage of them. And we've seen that, especially in East Africa. And I was in Nigeria last year. I've seen it there. A lot of the Anglophone countries are more friendly to entrepreneurial activities, and they seem to be doing better there, and there are great opportunities, and people will take advantage of the opportunities.
Sure.
Can you speak a little bit about, going from policy formulation towards policy implementation, and what key steps you think are needed to get from the idea stage to implementing some of the things you're talking about?
Well, the Marshall Plan, there's a great example too, because of its speed. It was set up very quickly within a year of congressional action. That was in part, I think, because it was run by business people, and there are no Marshall Plan offices in Europe today. There haven't been since 1952. So we both went in and went out, which is something the aid establishment hasn't done. Bill and I have met with a number of business people and talking about this idea, and we do think there'd be interest in the business community on taking that lead role. I think President Bush found that the Millennium Challenge account, quickly got mired in the State Department. And, with due respect, I love the State Department, but having business people take a lead might be a better route. Different.
We go in, there's lots of detail to this.
Yeah. We talk about actually how to set up the offices, how much to spend. I'm just trying not to where you could. Well, Goldman Sachs is, as Gita said, Goldman has been our partner in the 10,000 Women Initiative. When Lloyd Blankfein first talked to me about that, they were very interested in the economic lot of women in the poorest countries. We as a school were very interested in entrepreneurship, so we quickly came together on women entrepreneurs. I've offered to Lloyd that he and I could teach together in that program if I could ride in his G5 Global Express to Africa. But, sir.
My question is actually sort of what Eric mentioned. I'm going to read this, please forgive me. Eric mentioned tremendous opportunities in Africa for those that were courageous enough to go. So what do you think is the most common reason why you believe there's not a rush of business school students to seek out some of those opportunities? And what can you tell me, people like me, today, to get us to rush over, or at least to begin to get us to think about it? And I've heard some of these things before, like there's opportunity, but that's not going to sell me.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, as a person who graduated 6 years ago and didn't take part in that rush, to stay here in New York, I can tell you exactly what my thoughts would be. I think one of them is knowledge and just knowing what's really going on in the continent. You know, the continent's a vast place. You know, almost 1 billion people. 60 some odd different countries, 50 some odd different countries, different language blocks, different regional blocks. So it's not the easiest thing like I'm just going to pick up and go into London, you know, like one city or even a country, the UK. You have a large continent, a very diverse continent. So to the degree that you familiarize yourselves with kind of where the economic activity is actually more robust than others, that's one thing. The other thing is that to familiarize yourselves with the actors on the continent, because there are actors in the economic life of the continent, which are vast. You know, anything from mining industries, the telco industries. The richest man in Africa has actually made his money in telecoms, Mo Ibrahim, who just started a private equity fund about a year ago. There's a number of private equity funds, like I said, headquartered based here in the United States, based in the UK, and increasingly based on the ground in Africa. So you have hotbeds of economic activity on the continent. And I would probably say the 3 largest hotbeds of economic activity for what a typical business school graduate would be interested in. Where you start with South Africa, because it's definitely the most developed economy. Then in East Africa, you probably have 2 countries which you would look at would be Kenya and Tanzania, because of their sizes, the laws, and economic activity as well there. And obviously you can't overestimate Nigeria as well. I mean, 1 in 5 black Africans is Nigerian, so it's a huge internal market in Nigeria for a lot of different goods as well. So, you know, you have to just do your homework. It's not as easy as going to a corporate presentation and everyone's coming to you when you're here, right? I mean, that's what business school is all about. You know, I'm going to walk and go see, you know, whomever and do the corporate presentation. No one's going to come and give you a corporate presentation on, you know, actors doing something in Sub-Saharan Africa, or Obolore, which is a logistics company that does a lot of stuff in Sub-Saharan Africa, or BHP Billiton, or Barrick, different mining companies. So it's incumbent upon you to do a lot more research, because the people who have done their research have really capitalized on a lot of great opportunities, and they're still there.
Well, I think a shorthand would be talk to Eric.
Another Columbia short, you know, Paul Tierney, who's one of our adjunct faculty members for many years, is a successful venture capitalist, but he also does run TechnoServe. Roger Leeds is teaching a class this term, I believe, private equity in Africa. So there are people who've got a lot of business experience here right here in our own community who can help you out.
You'd be surprised to see how many alums are actually involved in the African continent. You know, you go on the website, you start in the alumni, the database, and start typing in country names and stuff. People's names pop up, you wouldn't assume.
Okay, we've got time for maybe a couple more questions, and we can hang around, but I want to keep you not here too late. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Dario. I'm from Canada studying mathematics. Concerning the IMF and World Bank and international development, concerning Africa, in your calculations, that's economics calculations, you leave space crisis management, does that come up? Do you leave like money aside and you do all that? Does that come into calculations as crisis management, war, genocide, all that happens in third world countries? If you want to do aid, like give development to third world countries, do you think about all that?
Absolutely. Paul Collier, who's a very distinguished African scholar at Oxford, the book that he wrote on the bottom billion, really focuses a lot on war and conflict, and particularly for the landlocked countries in Africa. That remains an important foreign policy objective, you know, for this country. That, however, just focusing on that doesn't jumpstart aid. So it's sort of like the healthcare debate. We're not arguing that that's not important. Of course it's very important. But I would note that countries that have more stable economic systems are also less prone to these kind of internal conflicts. And we have seen amazing success. Post-genocide Rwanda has been a great success story in terms of changing the focus to business, really has improved the Rwandan economy substantially, even in an economy that had been through one of the most wrenching situations possible. So maybe a couple more questions. Yes, ma'am.
I was interested in the flow of money into the program that you're proposing. In the last couple of years, there's been the emergence of a pretty significant amount of money coming out of the business community, notably the Silicon Valley, people taking a lot of interest in Africa and having a lot of the same interests in terms of promoting small, medium businesses in Africa. So I was wondering, how would you be leveraging the money from that community, not just the expertise, or would you be focusing more on organizations like the World Bank and congressional funding in the U.S.?
Well, we'd absolutely love to get the business community doing this with its money as well. Where your treasure is, your heart will follow. So we would love to get the business community more heavily involved. The rhetorical device we use in the book is getting half of the money we're currently spending in the public sector on aid, but absolutely getting the business sector more focused. Many of the Silicon Valley folks that you mentioned say they're about business, but they're really not. I mean, that's not how they're spending their money. So part of this is getting them to walk the walk that matches their talk. I'm going to take maybe another question, and then we'll hang out if you want. Sir? Yeah.
I agree that theoretically local business can lead to development, but I'm not entirely convinced that the Marshall Plan is the correct mechanism for Africa. You said yourself that the Marshall Plan in Europe was there to rebuild businesses that collapsed during the war. It's completely different from stimulating businesses from scratch. And if you look at the studies as what's hindering local enterprise in Africa, access to financing is only one of very many levels. Something like the 10,000 Women Program, which actually providing the skills and capabilities to develop those businesses is key. And it's a much more fundamental challenge than just throwing money at these entrepreneurs. Does your plan incorporate that as well?
Yeah, I mean, what I said in my remarks is that what we're borrowing from the Marshall Plan is more its software, how it worked. I mean, the fact that countries in Europe had to compete for their allocations based on reform. So you're still keeping the mechanics of reform very much in place, and you're still focusing money on capacity building of entrepreneurs. It's just that the actual aid itself would go to business people. That's the piece of the Marshall Plan that we're borrowing.
And also in Greece, it was not existing businesses, it was new businesses. And it was a tremendous success.
Why don't we give you the last formal word, Bill, since you're talking anyway?
Well, all I want to say is that I'm delighted after many years working a long time ago in Africa, where you would not run into local business and aid in the same sentence ever. We have, a Columbia program. We have Gita Johar going to work in it. We have graduates like Eric who want to do it. And now, actually, you're a lot luckier than I am, because let's say now 10% of aid or 10% of economic activity in Africa is local business. That's great. You can plug into that. When I was your age, it was 0. So you're far luckier than I am, and I hope that those of you who are interested do it. Stay in contact with these people who are good contacts, especially in Tanzania, Francophone West Africa, and wherever our dean happens to travel next. And thank you all for coming.
Yeah, thanks very much. We hope you'll take at the aid trap, but thanks for coming. We'll hang out a minute, but I know you have happy hour on your docket as well.